Warning, if you are a Linus Tech Tips fanboy, do not watch this video. So, I guess this video has kind of been a long time coming. Now, obviously, I am a computer nerd, and as part of that, I get asked a lot in my personal life if I am a Linus Tech Tips fan, because, I'm on YouTube, talk about computer stuff. A lot of people just make that assumption. And I am here today to tell you that no, I am not. And I kind of was planning on making this video for a while. I'm not really going to do a whole video essay about it. Frankly, I think it's a waste of my time. Um, but I am not a fan of his for multiple reasons. I could talk about how he lies to his fans. I could talk about how he rips off his fans with overpriced, crappy Chinese sweatshop merch. I could talk about how he's a shill for anyone who will agree to sponsor him. Um, I could talk about how his content that aims to be educational is obviously very lacking. There's a lot that I could do to, um, talk about why I am not a fan of. I will leave most of that critique up to Gamers Nexus. Gamers Nexus posted a great video a couple months ago talking about some of the problems that Linus Tech Tips has. I personally think it goes a bit more personal than that. I don't think Gamers Nexus was really kind of tackling the root of the problem. I think he kind of was a more surface level than he should have been. But nevertheless, I think that he addressed a lot of the problems that were very valid. Now, today I'm going to be giving in my 2 cents and kind of talking about why I don't like him from uh, kind of by giving an example. Now, recently he uploaded a video, Linus Tech Tips uploaded a video talking about RISC-V CPUs. And I figured that this was a fantastic chance in order for me to kind of give my 2 cents and kind of weigh in on it, since I am, I'm getting my master's degree in electrical engineering. Chip design is something that I have worked in the past. I've done internships. I've actually done it as a living, and it's what I'm doing my master's thesis in. So I am very familiar with the whole chip design process, the IC design flow. So I figured it's a great time for me to kind of comment and kind of visualize the problems that I have with him in terms of just why I personally am not a fan. I'm going to leave the more personal aspects of it kind of out of this video because I think that that's maybe more worth it for a dedicated video or just not really bothering with in general. So I think this is gonna be more of a topical critique as well. So what I'm gonna be doing is going through this video that he made. It's 18 minutes, and I will be kind of reacting, giving my thoughts, and we'll go from there. So let's get started. Okay, so right off the bat, the title of the video, "This CPU is free." Let's get started.
This computer is free. Or, well, it costs money to buy one, but...
So you've just clickbaited me. This is so this is a problem that I have. It's the CPU is free, but it costs money. So which is it, Linus? Which is it? This is the problem, is that he calls these clickable titles. Well, they're very clickable. Yes, they are clickable indeed, because they're clickbait. Because it is a bait and switch. You can't tell me the CPU is free and then, well, it actually costs money. We're 4 seconds into the video, and he's already admitting to clickbaiting. But, hey, I actually have ad block on, but if I was not an ad block user, he would have had my clicking on his, ad for YouTube, so he would have gotten his revenue off me anyway. It's all about getting the clicks, baby. Who cares about honesty?
The idea behind it is free. Free from patent restrictions, licensing fees, and all other manner of innovation-crushing limitations. And it actually works. Today. Look at it go! I can run regular old desktop Linux with a regular old keyboard and mouse.
It's almost like it's a computer. It's almost like it's a computer, guys. I mean, who would have thought? The RISC-V instruction set on a CPU is like an actual CPU. Who would have thought? It's crazy.
Yes!
Is that Quake? It looks like Quake. Or Unreal Tournament, maybe?
Even a few short years ago, the idea of RISC-V displacing or even competing with established architectures like x86 or ARM.
Okay. We're 43 seconds into the video. What are these things? Because you have to understand, what I'm critiquing this based off of is I'm an engineer. I know this stuff. I've worked in this stuff. I've done a master's thesis on this stuff. Okay, I get this stuff. The average YouTube viewer is not going to understand this topic. So Linus needs to do a very, very good job, and I'm going to wrap this all up at the end in a nice little bow. He needs to do a very good job of explaining this to the average YouTuber. He's talking about RISC-V, x86, and ARM. The average person watching YouTube doesn't know what these are. So already he's already at a loss.
Seemed like a pipe dream, but it's amazing just how much can be accomplished by a team of highly motivated industry giants like
true.
Google, Tencent, and Qualcomm.
That's true.
But the question is, why are they so motivated? What's wrong with x86 and ARM anyway? And why is US Senator Marco Rubio over there in the corner?
I'm just here to segue to our sponsor.
Of course. The sponsor shilling. Not a Linus Tech Tips video without that. Okay.
For memory, a 1 terabyte
R5 230. I actually made a video recently with an R5 250. Y'all remember that? My portable computer with the R5 250 in it? Yeah. I can imagine. I think I know why this computer is using outdated specs like that. But first, can we talk for a second about how cool this computer is that it actually runs a RISC-V based CPU? That's so cool. My inner nerd just kind of geeks out over that. It actually, I think this particular chip, yeah, it's 64 cores. It's a 64 core RISC-V chip. That's so cool.
RISC-V is an open standard instruction set that anyone can build a processor using it without any licensing fees or even permission. The one in here.
That's what open source is. That is what open source is. The problem I don't think I've watched a brief portion of this video. I don't think he's going to really do a good job of explaining what this means, though.
Here was built by, actually, okay, that's a little bit complicated. We're going to get to that later. First, let's fire it up and see how she works.
Why would you just tell me or don't?
Let's see if we can get into the BIOS on this bad boy. Spoiler, we can't.
Then why did you try?
While we wait for that, let's talk a little bit about RISC.
All right. And then this is where I want you guys to pay attention, because this is where I'm probably going to have a lot of critiques, because this is about to get super technical and also not technical enough. It's a very weird hybrid, and this is going to be kind of the crux of my critique of the entire video. But let's push forward.
As a bit of a refresher from our previous videos on the topic, an instruction set refers to the collection of the most basic functions that all other programs are built upon. Things like adding, subtracting, writing to memory, or reading from memory are all things you might find in a CPU's instruction set. The idea...
Okay, but what do they do? Okay, what do they do?
Some form or another.
History
PowerPC processors, like those found in old Macs, and
also found in the Xbox 360. Those ran a dual-core PowerPC architecture. PowerPC was made by IBM, just FYI. But yes, it was in the old Macs, and I think actually that's the reason why Microsoft adopted it, was because it was in those Macs. But the idea behind PowerPC being a RISC-based system, since it's a reduced instruction set, it's a lot more efficient. So when you have something like these Macs or the Xbox 360, they're operating off very, very strict power budgets. So having a less complex instruction set actually saves on power. So it's a lot more efficient in that way. So it's ideal for something that's a very low power and that you don't need, the most performance. So something like that is actually a really good use case for something. This iMac or a console.
And ARM processors, like those found in new Macs. Firefox then. It's taking a while. Oh wow, it's really slow. I feel like, yikes.
If you're curious as to why this experience is so slow, it's because the processor that he's using is clocked at 2 gigahertz. It's just a very slow chip. It's really not a mystery. I don't know why he keeps alluding to stuff later on in the video that's going to happen. It's because it's a very, very poorly clocked chip. And also, I'm assuming, I don't know this for certain, but I'm assuming the Linux distro that he's using to test this is really kind of early access, and it doesn't have all of the necessary optimizations to take advantage of the processor's architecture. I'm just assuming that, but based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like the hardware and software that he's using is very early in development and not necessarily ready to be rolled out fully yet.
What other software?
I'm wondering if, looking at this, I'm wondering if all these programs, because I mean, this is just a standard, like, it looks like a very standard base Linux install. He said it was using Fedora. I wonder if it's running off a compatibility layer, or if it's actually like all of this is native ported to RISC-V. I'd be actually kind of curious to see that, because I imagine it's some kind of compatibility layer, because it would be a lot of work to make this for RISC-V when no one's using a RISC-V chip yet. So porting all that software over would be a lot of work. So I imagine it's a compatibility layer thing.
Pretty exciting. But we've glossed over a pretty important detail
Yes, you have.
so far. The R in RISC is for reduced. Sure, okay, but reduced from what?
Okay. Yes, you haven't told me exactly what reduced means yet. So he's putting the cart before the horse here.
CISC, or complex instruction set computer processors, like the x86 chips made by Intel or AMD, have much more robust instruction sets. This allows them to complete complex operations with fewer inputs, something that used to be used to reduce both development time and the amount of disk space needed to store a program. Except the thing is, modern development tools are not.
It didn't. Yeah, it did save on space, but it was more so just a convenience factor. It was really just something that Intel did because they were the only game in town and they could kind of do whatever they wanted. And having more complex instructions was at the time more efficient than a RISC-based system. So
Nothing like what they used to be, and your typical dev no longer needs to worry about whether the CPU will perform one complex operation or if it will achieve the same result with half a dozen simpler ones. And Apple.
okay, but he's not talking about the technical difference between a complex instruction set and a reduced instruction set. With a reduced instruction set, what's happening is that the instruction set is simpler. It's not just shorter, and there's not just fewer of them, but it's a simpler instruction set. So what's happening is the CPU is completing that instruction with fewer clock cycles. Let's say a complex instruction set on an x86 chip takes dozens of clock cycles to complete. One on a RISC chip might take a single instruction clock cycle, or maybe a couple to complete. It's a lot fewer, so you can accomplish more tasks in a short amount of time. The problem is that you need more of those instructions. So that is the trade-off. But it's simpler, so it's easier to implement.
Apple proved with the launch of their M-series silicon that RISC's traditional role as an efficient but low-performance alternative could be left behind.
Okay, but you're not telling me why. There's nothing architecturally that prevents a RISC-based processor from being performant. It's just that x86 has been around since the late 70s, early 80s, so they've had 40 years of optimizations. But you have to understand, the reason, and this is my criticism, and Linus couldn't possibly know this, but the reason is not just, there's nothing inherently about RISC that makes it less performant than x86. It's just that they've had a lot more development time to refine it, but there's a lot that goes into it. You know, accessing your memory, pipelining for executing instructions, branch prediction, how you handle and avoid hazards within the pipeline. There's a lot that goes into this chip design optimization to make it as performant as it is. And of course, you have like clock speeds and other things that you get from just improving on your process that comes from your, you know, your place and route and actually iterating over your design a couple times. That just comes with development time. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's not just something that you can do overnight. It takes decades and upon decades of improving a design to get that level of performance that x86 has had for 40 years. RISC-V has barely had like 10 years for this. And it's just now, we're actually just starting to see the bare metal performance of these operating systems coming to fruition. So it's not that there's anything inherently less performant about it. It's just that you have to put R&D time into it. And when it comes to something like chip design and you know, ASIC design, it takes a very, very long time. It's a very slow process. So that's the thing that he's kind of glancing over here, and that's kind of one of my biggest critiques about him.
The special sauce that made Apple's M1 launch so successful was Rosetta 2, a translation layer that allowed x86 applications to run on Apple's new ARM RISC chips. And I bet you probably see where I'm going with this. Box
No.
64 is a super cool piece of software that should allow us to run x86 64-bit applications on RISC-V without recompiling them up front. Let's go ahead and try and install Steam.
Interesting. I actually did not know about this compatibility layer. That's pretty cool. I am really excited about RISC-V development. This is something that I think is really cool, and it is something that I am nerding about over. I wish I had more money because I really want to buy one of these dev kits and like just play around with it because it looks. I really want to have a RISC-V chip at some point. I just can't find. I want to find like a cheap like dev board to mess around with, but I just can't find anything on the market that within my budget just yet.
A big question we haven't touched on yet, though, is why not just use ARM? The truth is,
He answered this question earlier. It was at the start of the video, in the first couple seconds. RISC-V is free, so they don't have to pay licensing fees for it.
that the RISC-V instruction set is pretty similar, but there's a big difference, and that is that ARM is licensed. You see, even though
Yes,
Apple
we get it.
a development kit, starting with the front I/O, this Type-C port, for example, doubles as a debug console connector. Then there's the fact that it runs quad-channel memory. That's something I've not seen on the desktop in quite some time.
You run a Threadripper CPU. What are you talking about? What do you mean you haven't seen it in a long time? You own an HEDT platform. Okay.
There's two PCIe 16X slots that seem to operate at Gen 4 speeds.
Guys, this CPU can do PCI Express. It's so cool. Look at that. You can just plug PCI Express cards into it. Wow, so cool.
Another M.2, meaning
That CPU is acting like a CPU.
the SATA ports are weird. There's 5 of them,
They're
which is
dust
an odd number,
covers.
literally and figuratively. And the fact that they've all got these little covers on them,
They're
right?
dust
What
covers.
is up with that? According to Milk 5, these are dust covers, and that's not the only odd thing that the fact that they've all got these little covers on them, right? Like,
Did he take out that CMOS battery, or did it not come with it?
what is up with that? According to Milk 5, these are dust covers, and that's not the only odd thing that we asked them about. There's an MCU on here, which is an ARM chip?
What does the MCU do?
And according to Milk 5, they have no intention of replacing it with a RISC-V equivalent in the near future. And the
Did they say why? I mean, I don't know what that thing is doing. MCU microcontroller unit. I don't know what it's doing. Depending on how complex it is, maybe they don't want to fab out a RISC-V based chip for no reason when they can just get away with an ARM one for now.
The same can be said about the PCIe controller in the top left of the board. That is also an ARM chip.
I figured the PCIe controller would be on the CPU itself, not on the motherboard. Interesting.
Earlier in the video, and oh wow, this is funky. It only uses a 24-pin power connector. No additional 4-pin or 8-pin or anything for this.
Because it's a reduced instruction set. It's power efficient. In fact, you probably don't even need all 24 pin. It's just because it's a standard ATX power supply. You probably could get away with less than that. Because, I mean, compared to x86, I mean, this thing's only probably consuming a third of the power of like an x86 chip. I mean, what do Intel chips consume? 300 watts? I would imagine this one's like a third of that, like 100 watts or something, right? So
You
much
can
cool
see
stuff with
here,
that.
this has been modified to fit an Intel LGA 1150 cooler with a bracket that's included. So theoretically, you could use any 11.
I just want to point out, this is a video on a RISC-V like processor, and he's talking about the cooler that they're adapting for it.
50 cooler you wanted.
Linus, who watching this video is going to buy this dev kit? Who is buying it? Oh, if you buy this thing, you can just adapt any cooler you want to go onto it. First of all, who's going to buy it? Who's going to adapt a cooler for it? And lastly, this chip is so low powered, why would you need a beefier cooler to put on it? I don't get it. It very much seems to me like this is not the type of content that he should be making, because like he should just stick to like normal like computer stuff, because this, I mean, you have this really cool chip, this like feat of engineering that's going to be taking over the market in the coming years, and he's talking about the cooler on it. It's just like you're missing the mountain for the hills or the forest for the trees, you know?
But that's not what we're interested in. We want to take a look at what exactly it's cooling.
Oh wow. We had to get halfway through the video for him to be interested in the actual chip.
It turns out it's the chip division of Alibaba, the owner of AliExpress, not to mention a vast number of other companies.
That they own, this is just I think this is a small list. They own so much. This is a very, very large network of stuff that they own. And I think they own a lot of stuff in America too, you'd be surprised.
This chip then could be described as a collaboration between arguably the most powerful company in crypto and arguably the most powerful company in China. It's not.
I don't think Bitcoin did anything to contribute to the IP. I think they just use it.
Not exactly. Sci5, maker of the original RISC-V computer, has laid off roughly 20% of their workforce recently.
Yeah. At the time of this video, the tech sector for jobs sucks ass. I've been trying to look for a job when I get out of my grad school, and it's not going too well. So yeah, it's bad right now.
Now they claim that this is a restructuring, and it likely is, with Marco Rubio, oh that's why we had him in the background, quoted as saying, even though...
That's why we had him in the background. It's not like I read these scripts before I shoot the video.
But in practice, it's not going to hurt China nearly as much as it's going to hurt US companies like Sci5 as we hurtle towards a RISC-V future.
Yeah, because China's going to develop it with or without us. I mean, it's really like, the tech is out there. Like, it's just a matter of time. They're going to keep developing it. I mean, we can ban it all we want. Like, I know, out in the news the other day that, it was a couple weeks ago, they banned us from shipping China, like, NVIDIA GPUs. It's like, they're making their own GPUs already. You're just trying to slow them down. You're not gonna succeed. They have a lot of talented people in China who are working on making these chips better.
And I cannot overstate the pace at which this is happening. During the...
That is true. In the past couple, like 5 years, it's been amazing at how, like, quickly this stuff's been developing. It is a really good time to be in chip design. That's why I'm so passionate about it, man. It's just a really cool field to be into. Linus promises all editors a massive raise in 2024. Bullshit.
At this point, with our mentions of Steam and Proton, what does all of this mean for gamers?
Who cares? Why does this have to be a gaming thing? It's just, I know, like, that's who his channel is focused at, and he can't help himself talking about games. I mean, that's really kind of his, like, familiar territory, and he doesn't want to go into too much technical detail, but it's like, that's not the point of this. The point is that we're making, like, industry changing innovations here. Like, maybe don't worry about the games right now. Those will come later. Why don't you focus on the important stuff, like getting this into the hands of, like, more developers and consumers, and, you know, actual, like, mobile devices that people use, actually getting RISC-V silicon out there. Like, the gaming part, like, I get that you're a gamer and you like playing games, but it's like, that's not all there is to it. And maybe this is just me talking in a jaded way just because I'm passionate about this, but it's just like, it's priorities.
We tried an AMD 6000 series card and no bueno. No drivers. But that doesn't mean that you'll be limited to the best that Milk 5 certifies the system for, which is the RX 550. We found that it would work with...
Yeah, they're probably more worried about the actual CPU than the display. Also, that's interesting, actually. There's no integrated graphics on the chip, so they have to use an external GPU. That makes sense, because rather than designing an actual graphic core for the chip, just port an my microphone. Sorry about that. Just port an AMD driver over to RISC-V. That would be less work than taping something out that has a dedicated graphics core in it. So yeah, I guess so.
with any 500 series card as long as you have a beefy enough power supply, and went with an RX 580 to see how things would go. Just note though that you might need an upgraded power supply in order to get this working, because normally the system ships with a 350 watt power supply. But with that,
because it's a low powered chip and it doesn't need a beefy graphics card because it's not a gaming PC, you idiot.
24% of Alibaba.
Why do we care about Alibaba? Talk to me about Risk 5.
Jack Ma.
He's trying to cover like so many different, like we've gone from talking about instruction sets to Risk 5 to like Alibaba to like geopolitics. Like there's no focus on this video. Like if you wanted to do this topic justice, this would be like a 2-hour long video, honestly. But it's like he's trying to cram everything in under 20 minutes. It's just not going to work.
That strategy, allowing the Chinese government to be free of any foreign interference in their tech development.
And that is when America gets screwed. We are very scared about that happening, but it is going to happen. And if they want to get there by 2025, I think they can get there by 2025.
China, at least at some point. Based on the benchmarks, there is still a lot of work to be done.
Linus, they're not using it for gaming, dummy. They're using it for, what is this? Oh, this is comparing it to a phone. But still, they're not using it for gaming. They're using it for like scientific work and not playing YouTube videos or playing video games. I know it's still pretty low powered right now, but you have to understand like the use case. They're not going to be in everyone's desktop tomorrow. Is this just them playing? Okay, I'm not going to watch that.
5, fairly crap. But then Apple released the M1 in 2020 and people were shocked at how competent it could be at such a low power level. Well,
because there's nothing inherent about a RISC-based instruction set that makes a CPU less performant. Again, he keeps ignoring, and I get it. This is a topic that is too technical for Linus. It's too technical for anyone in his little company. None of them have the necessary like understanding of this, and they probably can't go call up a chip design expert and ask them. So I understand, but you have to understand from a technical perspective, there's nothing inherent about a RISC-based chip that makes it lower powered than a CISC-based chip. It's all about the architecture. It comes to the actual architecting of the CPU. It has nothing to do with the instruction set. That's not an indicator of performance. There's a lot that goes into it, like I mentioned before.
RISC-V is a lot closer than you would think to its M1 moment.
That is true. A lot of the takeaways that we took from Apple's M1 we can implement here. That is true.
With a solid backer deciding they are done paying Intel or ARM for licensing fees, it could be your next desktop or laptop processor virtually overnight.
It's already happening, by the way. I don't know why maybe he doesn't know about it, but yeah, no, this is already happening. Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, they're all making their own chips now. And yeah, I think they're moving to, I mean, they're probably using ARM right now, but they're going to be moving to RISC-V in the coming years, so they don't have to get around that licensing fees. I actually don't know what ARM is going to do. And with RISC-V coming out, I don't know what it is that they're going to do. They're going to have to innovate in some way. They're going to have to do something pretty spectacular. x86 I actually feel like could last longer than ARM because there are legitimate use cases for a CISC-based instruction set compared to RISC, but even then, I still think x86 days are numbered just because it's so damn power hungry compared to RISC.
All it takes is one company, like a Google, a Huawei.
It's already happening.
Want to create a...
Okay, all right, we're done. Okay, all right, so... All right, so that's the video. Yeah, I just feel like that video kind of summed up my main criticisms of Linus and his content is that when you want to watch him, you know, water cool all the computers in his house with his pool, great, that's fine. When you want to watch him fool a CPU with peanut butter, concrete, chocolate, alcohol, tea, and then like getting some $50,000 like factory manufacturing grade, like, water compressor or whatever. That's fine, watching him do all that silly stuff. But when it comes to these really technical topics, no one there at his company is equipped to discuss it in the level that you need to. So, like that video, for example, how many people are going to walk away from this video actually understanding what an instruction set is? He kind of explained it at the beginning when he's talking, like, what is an instruction set?
CPU's instruction set. The idea of a processor with a minimal or reduced instruction set started in the late 1970s.
He kind of it's almost non-existent. He gives a history lesson about it, but he doesn't really tell us what an instruction set is. Like, I think that there are a lot of people who are going to look at this video and think, "Oh, an instruction set is like code that's loaded onto the CPU. Why can't Intel and AMD and ARM just load up RISC-V code onto their CPUs and we have RISC RISC-V CPUs everywhere?" Because that's not how it works. An instruction set is not code. It doesn't. It's not just code that sits there that you type out. That's not how instruction sets work. Instruction sets are the instructions that a CPU executes through its pipeline. So not you don't just type out the instructions that you want in the form of code. You actually have to architect a CPU. You have to lay out the registers and the multiplexers and the adders, and you have to set up your bus and your memory accessing and reading and writing, and basically, and you do all that through Verilog, and through that's how you architect a chip to be able to carry out all those instructions. So an instruction set's not just code; it's the way that a CPU behaves in order to achieve all those instructions through its pipeline. So I just don't think that people are going to come away from this video really understanding that. And I just think that don't when you're talking about stuff that's this technical, don't half-ass it, and don't give people anything that's wrong. I didn't see anything in this video that was blatantly wrong or necessarily misinformation, but I think that it's kind of the next worst thing. I think it was explaining it so inadequately that people are going to walk away from this video not really understanding what they just watched. And that's just as bad as misinforming them, in my opinion. But again, to do this topic properly would have taken someone with actual background in the field, and it would have taken like 2 hours. And then, like, if you want to make a video about RISC-V, that's fine. But then he goes into like all this weird stuff about politics and, you know, the trade between the U.S. and China, and how China is like making their own chips, and how like these big companies are operating, and how, oh, if we have one big company back us, we can make it. It's like he's trying to hit on so many points. It's like, yes, this is a very complicated topic, and there are geopolitical, intricacies here at play. Absolutely. But you can't talk about all of that in an 18-minute video. It just doesn't it the content doesn't lend itself that way. You really need to have a 3-hour kind of documentary based style with industry experts talking about this. And you need to have multiple of them. You need to have people talking about it from the political side, the business side, the engineering side. You really need to do a better job than just Linus talking about stuff that one of his, non-technical writers put on a script in under 20 minutes. It's just inadequate. And that's why I really don't like Linus Tech Tips from a technical standpoint. And I can't get into his content when he tries to talk about really technical topics, because it's just an inadequate representation of a very serious, complex topic. Now, I will say that I am a little bit biased and I am a little bit privileged in this regard because, I have an engineering background. I have a master's degree. I've done thesis work in here. I've worked in industry before. So, yeah, I am at the top echelon of the YouTube viewers who are watching this. And I'm not saying that to brag on myself. It's just a fact in terms of my background and my experiences. Yes, I am probably not the intended demographic for this video, but I still think for people who, want to try to understand this, they can get better information than this, and I think that they're entitled to better information. So that's why I'm not really big on Linus Tech Tips from a content perspective. I'm not really into his Top Gear content where he's like, "Oh, watch me build a $10,000 computer because it's fast and we can see all the pretty pictures and, you know, um, what's that CPU benchmarking tool? I don't know. The CPU benchmarking tool in Task Manager shows us all these cores. Look at how neat it is. I'm just not into that. But I am interested in the really technical topics and, you know, learning more. And I can't get that from this. It's just there's no depth here that's going to allow me to really learn anything, or even the average consumer. You've just thrown so much content at them from like 5 different topics, all under a minute long, and it's just you're not really going to leave anyone walking away knowing what they just watched. And that's really, in my opinion, the biggest sin. I think I've kind of said all I can say here at this point. I reacted to the video. So, let me know what you guys think down below. Am I out of line? Am I out of touch? Let me know what you think. But this was my 2 cents, and this is why I am not a Linus Tech Tips fan. I wanted to leave the more personal stuff out of it, but that is definitely a whole other angle that we can talk about later. But this is from the content side of it. So, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.